What up, fam?
Hey, how's my mic?
I can hear you.
Loud and
Okay,
clear.
awesome. Awesome.
That's a good place to start. I think we're a few minutes in here. I'm just queuing up some tweets that I want to ask you about. Hey, everybody, welcome to our weekly Twitter space. Thank you for coming. 0xDesigner, it is such a privilege to have you here. I've been a big fan for a long time. For those of you who don't know, this week we are going to be talking and doing a fireside chat with him about his work in design generally. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan too. I actually want to start by asking you a question.
I'm all ears.
Okay. What's your most left curve description of what a blink is?
Left curve. I think basically I think my most left curve description of a blink is the one I use all the time, which is it's a way to just teleport buttons all over the internet. Like that's all it is. Just take button from a product and put it in places that are not the product.
That's really good, actually.
I've been like switching between like teleport, wormhole, like just pick your physics uh cosmos metaphor, but yeah, that's how I think about it. How about you?
I've been, I've been tweeting a lot about blinks lately, and then I find myself in conversation with someone just expressing like enthusiasm and excitement for like the possibilities that it opens up. And then like 10 minutes into my rambling, I'm always met with, okay, what is a blink? And that feels like the thing that's top of mind for me of like I'm thinking ahead to use cases, but there's still this like explanation or description needed for what it actually is and how it works. And so my description is always something like a pre-constructed transaction that you can share in a link, and it doesn't feel dumb enough. like I'm sort of
Yeah,
finding the
that's
best way
not
to describe
definitely,
it.
you're too right curve here. That's definitely true. I've been working on this for a long time, and actually, I'll just say for the audience, like for me, I know you've been talking a lot about Blinks for the last couple of months. It's been fantastic, just like seeing your ideas on the timeline. But I think you've been thinking about related ideas for probably a few years at least. I've been following you for a long time. I did a little bit of digging back on your timeline, but I feel like this space is one that you've been talking about for a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean
And
teleported buttons has always been the most exciting part about crypto for me. I'm gonna start using that.
yeah,
That already feels good saying that out loud.
and again, I want to ask you questions, but the other half of it that I've found that works really well, and this was someone else said this just like a week ago. They said it's like crypto native link previews, which is like the link previews, this like, and this is just me, I rant about this all the time of like the link preview is one of the most powerful tools to make the internet shareable and social that we've seen in like the entire internet's history. And why did they stop at like image, title, description, and crypto? Like it has this ability to smash some buttons on it too. But anyway, these are going to be some questions for you. I would love to just dive into it and just I did, like I've got a ton of questions for you. I don't know how many of these we'll get through, and it's going to be a little bit like rambling and meandering. So more is more here for sure. Just like just really excited to pick your brain on all of these questions. Let's start here. Your pinned tweet, like on your profile, I've got it here in the space. Says this is what I mean when I say interoperability is crypto's killer feature. What does that mean to you? And for anyone in the space, you should check this out. It's got like an amazing list of examples. What does that mean to you, though? And what was this realization like for you? When did you come to this conviction?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was. I'd been paying attention to crypto since like 2016, 2017, but I had a really long time horizon. Like I was investing tiny amounts in like Bitcoin and Ethereum, mostly in 2017. And I put it away with the intention that it was going to be like multi decades, not even multi years. It's like I don't have kids. When I do have kids and they're my age, this stuff will be valuable. So like I had an extremely long time horizon, knowing that like there was a lot of talk around um, just what crypto could become and tokenization and like this new money, a lot of the OG thinking around crypto. And then the cartoon monkeys happened in 2021, and then everybody started talking, like all these figureheads started talking about like all the things that we could tokenize, and it was just really exciting. I went down this rabbit hole, lit up like a Christmas tree, just thinking about what the internet could be like if you could own parts of it, if like you could basically plug in things that you owned into other apps. And I don't, there wasn't like one specific thing. It was just for whatever reason, my information diet was in the summer of 2021 was just like the I was mainly spending time in less in crypto Twitter or like the crypto world and more in like the startup world and in the tech ecosystem. And that was when like crypto was just kind of bleeding into everything. And it was just really exciting to think about from purely a product perspective what it could mean if you experimented with like a token gated product or token gated content. Um, if I could own things and then basically tell other apps that I own them and then get like special perks. And so, like, again, purely from a product perspective, thinking about what sort of user experiences could we design if you could know something about a person that they did in another app. And that was a light bulb moment for me where I was like, all right, all of my time, money, energy, and attention is here because this feels like truly like a novel breakthrough moment of what the internet could be like. And so when I say interoperability, it's really just like being able to do anything on any app, anywhere on the internet, and then it just like affects your experiences everywhere you go. And that was and still is like it still feels like when I think about that, it still feels like the first time I thought about it. It's the most exciting part about crypto by far.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was the token and the NFT. And you said this was like summer 21, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like class of in terms of like actually doing a lot of stuff on chain. I'm like class of 21. Similarly, I was doing a little bit of DeFi summer 2020 stuff, but it was really Solana for me was the big unlock. So it's like the token and the NFT as this. It's like I love it. I know a lot of people do, and I love this description. It's like a row in a database is all it is, and the fact that we all share this database is that what you mean? Like that was the unlock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Rewinding a little bit, like what's your origin story? So how did you get into design, and then what was that transition to crypto? I know you shared a little bit on the second question, but what's the backstory on design?
Um, so I didn't I was never like formally trained in design. My background's in economics and psychology. By background, I mean like that's what I studied in undergrad. Like I'm not like a professional by any means. Took like a really boring corporate uh, cubicle job right after school, and then like just quit with no plans thereafter. Just because I was like the quintessential millennial. I was like wearing tight pants and spending $6 on a coffee, working with a bunch of people that were like way older than me and getting ridiculed for it every day. Um, and so very quickly, I knew I wanted to just kind of pivot into tech. I was just really excited about all the stuff happening in the tech world. This was like a few years right after mobile was the big thing, and yeah, I mean my interests academically were always like the behavioral sciences, and design just felt like my ticket into tech because I didn't know how to code, and frankly, I was like too lazy to learn how to code, and so I felt like that was design was just the most translatable version of like interest and skill set. And so yeah, just started. I don't know how to say this without revealing too much. Just started doing design things on a project basis and doing a ton of free work until it spawned like an independent career.
And that was nights and weekends. Like, did you just like dive in head first, or did you do nights and weekends?
Oh no, I dove in like fully head first, like quit my job and then just started learning how to make websites and started doing it for friends, and then that turned into um, income.
And this is product in the, you mentioned you'd studied things around behavioral, like things around like human behavior. This is product in like the UX sense, not just, and like, and design in the product sense, not just the like UI design. How do you think about the distinction between the two of those? Because the stuff you post is extremely well designed too, like beautiful. And so like, how do you think about the two of those?
Yeah, early days in my design career was just purely web design, and like my first job out of college was actually marketing analytics. So I'd spent a ton of time in spreadsheets and just kind of being really analytical about like really high volume sales stuff. Um, and so it was like using basically just like building websites and then offering to do like analytics of what was working and what wasn't. That was kind of like the foray, and then that turned into like a whole web design business that I ended up like creating an agency out of, and then eventually sold after a few years because I realized that after doing it for some time, the distinction for me was like the before the login and then after the login screen. So when you're doing web design, you're just trying to make something appear more desirable. You're trying to like communicate things clearly so that the value proposition is clear. And that was cool. That just felt like more traditional design like, and over time, just doing that long enough, just kind of learned on the job. And then very quickly thereafter, I realized that like the really interesting design problems were the stuff that happened after the login screen. So, once you acquired a user, they had some specific intention or some task or some problem that this software was going to solve for them. And then the thinking completely changes, when it's like when a user gets to the point after the login screen and you just have to figure out like what are they expecting and how do you present that information as clearly and as intuitively as possible. And then like it felt more natural to me because that part of design felt more like the science version of like the design process, whereas everything like from a product perspective, it's more of like a science of how you design things. Whereas before that, like before the login screen or in more of a marketing capacity, it's more creative and subjective and more branding, which never really felt natural for me.
Login in crypto is quite a bit different than it is in like traditional web 2, and that was one of the most striking things to me when I first started playing around with like real actual on-chain apps. What do you think is good about it and what is not good? What do we need to fix?
About logging in with crypto?
Yeah, like Connect Wallet.
Well, I think that ideally on paper, connecting a wallet is like the best possible way to log in, figuratively speaking, because you have all this information, all this data, and all you have to do is like connect this thing that you have to the website as opposed to like remembering passwords or going through like a multi-step process like enter an email and use like an authentication code. And I actually think that again on paper that's the ideal version of how we use any app in the future. Now and this is my answer to like what is crypto's biggest issue right now is that like it's even more of a pain to connect your wallet now than it is to log in with username and password because of how much app switching is required. At least on mobile, it's so hard. Like this morning, I was tweeting and complaining about an app that I had connected my wallet to, and it was still asking me for an email, and I ended up like abandoning the thing that I was trying to do. And I can't tell you how often like my friends mint things on Zora, for instance, and I go through the process of trying to mint it. Like I'll click a link on Twitter, it'll take me to Zora, and then I have to click mint, and then it asks me to connect my wallet, and then it takes me to my wallet, and then I have to go back, and then it pushes me back to my wallet. I have to sign the message. Like this, uh, 10 uh, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's like a 10-step, 1 minute process to just get a mint that I found on Twitter. But
It's
ideally, there's some ultimate future where that's not the case.
it is the both the to like for me, I think open permissionless financial systems is like, crypto's main superpower. I get it. Incredibly fascinating to me. It's the interoperability that was what got me wanting to build in crypto. And that is really like very much our focus at Dialect. And there is this just insanity to just how promising the wallet is as a way to prove who you are on the internet, and then the just ridiculousness of the reality today of the flows that you go through. Do you think there is a simple solution that nobody's built yet, or do you really feel like this is like a tangled, complicated issue?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I try to contribute to the conversation around like what technical things need to happen, and it's not my lane. Like I don't know what needs to happen in order for me to just press connect wallet and I'm connected without doing any app switching. I've attempted to think about what that might look like. A couple of days ago I tweeted a concept around like just being able to connect a smart wallet, which I know is something that Coinbase is started working on, and probably every other like wallet company will follow suit. Something that feels like browser native. That seems like the most feasible, viable outcome, where it's just like the wallet maybe has a different form factor. What do you think? You probably have a better answer to this than I do.
We've in we're not in the business of creating like signing with Google. I think there's some amazing new products and even multiple generations of them. Like you have the Magic and Privies. I think TipLink is just like incredible now. We're seeing more and more stuff with passkeys. I think the game though that we've been playing is trying to create like Blinks are all about, and before Blinks, a little bit of backstory for the audience here. We were doing things related to this together with Solana for a couple of years now. We had smart messages in 2023. Solana Pay is actually closely related to this. And through all of these experimentations, it's always been like Blinks are all about like time between a call to action and an action, like speed of execution. And I'm like obsessed with this problem. And so we butted up against this a lot. To answer your question, I think like, for example, we tried to create a self custody Telegram trading bot, and we were threading a needle between what the iOS operating system, or let's say Mac OS, because you can use Telegram on desktop and mobile, like what it will allow you to do, things like deep links, all that. Plus, like how do you target a specific wallet in a deep link directly into a wallet such as Phantom, like you were talking about? And like most of this stuff is just not possible. And it requires, like, even if you say, let's just work with the limitations we have just in iOS, because like, it's going to be a little while before we can like petition Tim Cook to make some changes. But if you just stick to that, it's a coordination between a lot of different teams to do things right and create like interoperability is a promise, but it's still a far way off to really do it well. So we've been butting up against that for a while, and even just with Blinks, like rendering on Twitter, rendering on mobile, making signing really easy on sites like Dial2, this like pop up site we've got. It's far from solved. So I think it's just like interoperability really requires the communication of information between products, and Web 2 was not really designed with that in mind. Like iOS and the way apps talk to each other is not really designed with that in mind. And so we're kind of butting up against the issues there. That's a segue to my next question. So why do you think interoperability did not take off in Web 2?
Yeah, I think the simple answer
Or do you
just
agree with that statement? Yeah.
no. I think the simple answer is just that there's no incentives to create open networks. I mean,
Do you,
the most valuable companies in the world have captured attention, and if they release their grip on, like for instance, if I go to Instagram that has billions of users, where everyone is spending, like Instagram or Twitter or you name it, whatever the social network is, and then I have a portable social graph, it's way easier to leave and go to a competitor product. So most of the value capture is in those closed networks.
do you think we're misguided in thinking the incentives are different in Web3 and that we're just early days? And then, like, when someone begins to really take off, some SocialFi product, that they're going to close their walls down because it's in their interests? Or do you think things are different now in Web3?
I don't think things are different now. I feel like there's still this incentive to value capture across the entire like vertical stack of an ecosystem. Like if somebody wins on the app layer, they're going to try to fork whatever protocol they're using and try to own the value capture there. And it's just like all the way up and down, people are still trying to compete and just capture as much of that value as possible. But I think what crypto enables are just new ways of monetizing where like you don't have to necessarily build if we're talking about social networks, you don't necessarily have to build a social network that monetizes or has like a main primary KPI for like time spent or attention spent. I think, there's it unlocks new ways of monetizing around transacting or um, like the value of a token and those sorts of things. I think there are just like other ways to capture value than just time spent, and I think that um, in that world, having open networks where people can just like jump around to any app, that becomes okay.
That's an interesting idea. So it's kind of like because the internet was not inherently monetizable, it was about time spent. And that's what's driven these incentives. But now with crypto, there's a base layer of monetization that can be added. Is that related to or in line with what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. Like what's your incentive working on dialect? Where's most of the value capture for you?
For me, I mean, that's a question our investors love to ask us, and we have a bunch of, I think, interesting answers to this. To me, I'm on this mission to just like increase APM, to use the StarCraft phrase of like just how many actions per minute can I take on the internet. It is insane to me that we have this purely digital world that we live in, and we're like ponderously like plotting around between products and websites to just do things. I just find it insane, and it's just like the internet could be so much better, and that's very user centric. It's not like business centric. um, and I believe fundamentally we can build a big and profitable business off of that, but that's not my motivation.
But actions per minute can happen on any app or website, right?
Yeah, just I get an email like you have this. I should pin it, but the like reminder that your ENS domain is about to expire, and just smash the button in the alert, and just you renew. The same applies on the internet generally. Of like you get an email telling you your rent is due or you're going to pay down your credit bill, and just the like having to go to another place to do that. And then I've said this so many times, but like you're in an embedded browser in your email mobile app and you're not logged into your bank and you're just fumbling around, and it's just like I just want to smash the button and pay it.
Exactly. And so your incentive is to make that action happen on as many apps and websites and not build one single
Exactly.
app that people have to log into in order to take that action.
That's right. And the hope that we have, and I think this is an open question, is that this internet can be different. Like this version of the commercial internet is not about foot traffic on a website, but about actions taken. And so my like the whatever that meme is with the like layers of the gigabrainness, I'm hoping, and I don't think we've proved it yet, that like in the way that the infinite feed on a website was the 15 years in the making, like true non-skeuomorphic to print media, like true form of the web 2 internet, that something like actions and blinks is the true like 15 years in the making non-skeuomorphic version of like a true web 3 internet. People don't think about this like how do I get people to visit my site.
Right.
It's more how do I get people to interact with my product or like my
Exactly.
experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Do you think
that's what I
that's going
think
to
is the,
happen?
well, I mean,
Do you think that can?
I think dialect is a perfect example of that, what you just described. Like the more, I mean, I don't know what the business model is for blinks, but eventually there will be one if there isn't already. And the more people engage with blinks, then that's your incentive. And so your incentive is to create something that any any app or website can implement, and they will be equally incentivized to adopt it because it adds value or improves user experience. Um, and so I think that's already happening. Like another example that I keep coming back to is like in an ideal world, like Farcaster doesn't become successful if Warpcast has as many users as Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. It becomes successful when every other social media app adopts their social graph. So, like right now, Warpcast is just the means with which we follow and unfollow people and the place where we create content. But ultimately, it becomes most successful when content is created on as many apps as possible. And so, I think that's happening right now.
How do you come up with ideas? Like, what's your day to day like?
Ooh, okay, hard
You
pivot.
post like once a day ish, right? Like you like, and they're really interesting and creative ideas. Like, what's your creative process?
It's what's my creative process? This I feel like I have a clear answer, but it's not convincing for myself just because I've been doing it every day for so long that I haven't really taken a moment to sort of step back and reflect on what the process is. So a lot of it feels like it's
Also,
tacit.
I'll just caveat to the audience that I sent you these questions like 2 minutes before the space started. So just whatever, just riff, whatever you want to. It's totally fine.
Yeah, no, I actually think like me not having a clear answer for my process is the answer. But it always starts with one of two things. Because I'm doing it every day, I think it takes a lot of like creative energy to think of an idea and then to create some visual around how to articulate a solution to it. But again, like with most design things, it starts with a problem, and the problems are always sourced from either something I'm seeing in the feed of like some app or whoever the main character is at the moment, and then it's mostly inspired or influenced by my own anecdotal experience of using something and just trying to, over time I've gotten a lot better at this, but just being really aware at the inconveniences that I experience myself. And that's actually like I've learned a lot harder to do um, than you might think because crypto is like self-selecting for early adopters and very like a curious audience, and so naturally our tolerance for inconveniences and bad UX is really high. And even beyond that, like in most of the crypto products we've used thus far, I think this will change over time as the culture grows. But like the profit incentive is high enough where even if we have a bad experience and we're aware of it, that there's still like motivation to continue using something and just deal with whatever the inconvenience is. So it always starts with something that's top of mind for me that I'm experiencing with a crypto app, or it's the other way around. So as I've honed that sort of like awareness to just think about like a problem that I'm having, it also shows up in like everyday life where I'm, paying for coffee or applying for a new apartment, and then just kind of flipping that whole thinking on its head. So rather than how do I make crypto better, it's how can crypto make everyday life better? And that's just like my morning routine. I'll just wake up and start thinking about it. I have a list, like a really long list in my notes where if something comes to mind, I'll write it down. And most of the time, those ideas never really make it into the content. But sometimes, after an idea lingers long enough, I'll come back to it and just have sort of like a light bulb moment of how to articulate that visually. So I think that's it for the most part.
Those light bulb moments, are they like sort of like nonverbal flashes of insight? You mentioned a bunch about like as you're using things throughout the day, you're experiencing points of friction or problems, and we all like to say that like the right way to build companies and build products and great design is to like work backward from a problem. And I have your tweet pinned here. Um, but those moments of like free invention, like Einstein is famous for, I don't remember the exact quote, but he's famous for having said, like, you're fooling yourself if you think all of science is just hypotheses. Free invention and creativity plays a really big part. So I wanted to ask you, like, to what extent, something I think a lot about is like, to what extent, like, people criticize crypto as like one massive solution looking for a problem. But another way I would put it is like the famous thing about new technology is like whatever developers are like playing around with on their nights and weekends is what the like megacorp day job cubicle people are building 15 years later, like what they're doing for their job. So like to what extent is like creativity, free invention, like just sort of like, wouldn't it be cool if kinds of ideas come to you that are not really driven um, by a problem? Does that work into your creative flow at all? Like, what are these sparks of insight like? Are they truly just problem based?
for the most part. But I will say that like more ideas breed more ideas. And when I mentioned that I have a long list of potential ideas that never actually make it into Figma or onto Twitter, it's not that the problems aren't worthwhile. It's that the articulated design or the visual is a challenge because one of the constraints is just figuring out how do I show one screen, and even beyond that, how do I show one button on one screen? Because most of the time most of the time it doesn't make sense to show an entire screen, so it has to be just like one section of a screen that articulates some possibility that you can imagine. That's usually the hard part. Like there are so many problems that uh, that we could talk about, that I've written down, that I've thought of, but it's like, A, what's the solution? And B, what's the solution that you can see and understand and imagine while scrolling a feed with and you have like a few, not even seconds, just like milliseconds to consume it and digest it. And so I think that, to your point, oftentimes I'll start creating a visual and then another idea will come into it and the entire like design will change just because like I've started working on it. I'm seeing it, I'm touching it, I'm feeling it, I'm trying to imagine myself consuming it like in a feed, and then it just like highlights some other problem or some other like idea, and that's not uncommon where I'll like start on one thing and then the thing that I end up posting looks completely different than the idea that I had in my head when I started.
People often say that like great design or product design is a process of like reduction, removal, simplification. What I'm hearing from what you're saying right now is like you have an idea, and if you can't communicate it really succinctly on a tweet, because you're right, the attention span of a tweet is really small, then you might shelve it. Do you think communication is just like an inherent part of product design then? Maybe even just for you or generally?
um yeah, definitely. I think my where my mind goes when you ask that question is I think that's what's been so fun about creating content and creating fictional concepts is that traditional product design is actually not that creative at all. Like if you talk to any experienced product designer, it's really just like you don't have much creativity around how to present things. There's a lot of rules and patterns that you have to follow in order to keep things consistent. You have to, you know, create designs that go into production that engineers can work with, and you have to be really efficient about that handoff. And there's just a ton of constraints around what can be designed, and a lot of effort and nuance that goes into like tiny elements. Um, so creating content, creating these fictional designs has like sort of broken all of those constraints and allowed me to think more creatively and design more creatively. But ultimately, like good design is um, yeah, like it really is a science when you're creating stuff and shipping stuff into production because the example that I like to use is and this is a question for you is like where do you find the shopping cart when you're shopping online?
I guess it depends on the product. On web, I expect it in the upper right, and then on let's say mobile, I expect it in the the, the like tabs at the bottom of the app. Is
Yeah,
this a
and
trick
it's all
question?
no,
Yeah.
that's it. Like it's always there. And if you try to be creative about where you place the shopping cart on web or mobile, you're gonna lose a customer. It's like not only will you lose a customer, you'll lose like 90 something percent of the people trying to buy whatever you're selling. So like good design is just following patterns that most other websites use. So said in another way, like good design is just a lot of copying. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
kind of
like meeting expectations. Yeah.
exactly. So even when I'm creating these like fictional concepts, the one constraint I have to apply on myself is like I have to use interfaces that people are familiar with, because if I have a few milliseconds to articulate some imaginary scenario to you, the more familiar it is, the faster you'll be able to consume and digest it. And so the creative part is just thinking about like not necessarily how to articulate it, but what's a problem that I feel that I think that a lot of other people can relate to.
That's kind of like the blessing and the curse of this like crypto native interoperable like website-less appless future is now there's like no upper right corner of the website. I mean, I can say practically on a blink, but just the concept generally. And there's no like bottom tab if you're not in a mobile app. At the same time, like the blessing is like when you're trying to give context to users of like instead of showing a whole website, being able to show like a little bit of extra functionality on a message in iMessage, which is like one of my favorite themes of the designs that you've done is like there's so much context there about who shared it with you, the conversation you're having with someone, the intent of what you want to do. Like that's this whole new design space. It's just breaking the mold of like I expect the shopping cart in the upper right.
Well, no,
Like
I
is
actually
this
think
related to? Oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to jump in. I actually think interoperability doesn't change anything on the interface layer. It actually reduces it. So like if I'm onboarding a new app and like I keep coming back to like a portable social graph, but like if I'm onboarding into a new social platform, like the first few things after I enter email address, password, create a username, select my interests, and start following people. Because if I don't do all of those things, then I end up in like a blank screen, or I end up getting served content that's not relevant to me at all. And so what interoperability makes interesting is actually removing a lot of steps that I would have otherwise had. Because if I'm logging into my wallet, I already follow some people. You can already make inferences on what my interests are based on my on-chain activity or things that I own. I already have a username that I've created in multiple places. And so interoperability doesn't necessarily enable more creativity on the front end. It actually does the opposite. It removes like all these unnecessary steps so we can just like jump into the thing we came for faster.
I love that. Yeah. And then the real challenge is like, how do you create a full shopping experience from a chat and make it intuitive? If
From
we're
a
not
chat?
like, yeah, like if you're not visiting Amazon.com and you're not like, oh, I know I've clicked all these things. Now I know where the shopping cart is. You're sort of just like feeding it to people in a small bubble in a chat, you know?
Well,
Meaning there's
okay,
some
so
new conceptual design work there, right?
it
Like
doesn't
to
have
help
to be.
steer users.
It doesn't have to be.
Go
Like
ahead.
here's another example. Like I was using to demonstrate the idea. I was like just thinking about what a social app or a social network or a new social platform might look like. But let's say, uh, like I've been using Amazon for, man, I don't even know, 15 years. So Amazon knows exactly what I like to buy. And Amazon has all this history of purchases and things that I've clicked on and things that I've subscribed to. So for Amazon, as soon as I open the app, like it's going to serve me up product recommendations that I really like. But if somebody wants to compete with Amazon, they have to, like, it's going to be tough because they don't have 10 or 15 years of purchase history. But if I connect my wallet to this new e-commerce platform, it already knows people that I've interacted with, people that I follow, people that I have connections with, things that I've purchased in the past. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like everyday household items. It could literally just be other NFTs that I've bought and make inferences on like my preferences there. And they could start serving me up um, products that I might like. So right now, if I go shopping on some like I shop on Essence a lot. It's like a fashion reseller, and when I get to Essence, I have to like click men's, and then I have to click like tops, and then I have to filter for brands that I like. Whereas if somebody were to create a Web3 version of that, they already know that I buy a lot of like men's apparel, and that I have like a price point in this range more often than not. And like there's just context when I'm shopping. So I get served better product recommendations, which will get me to convert faster because I have to do less work to build the cart and find the things that I want to shop for. And B, it creates a social layer on top. So if this shopping app knows that you and I interact often, and I'm trying to determine if I want to buy this shirt that I really like, but you've bought it before, then they can tell me that you've bought it. And that gives me social proof to know that like you bought it, you reviewed it, you liked it. And I don't want to wear the same thing that you're wearing because I see you often, which is useful context. Or B, it just gives me more confidence that that I'll like this product. And so like in that way, you don't necessarily have to redesign the shopping experience, but you can hyper personalize it right off the bat. And to me, that's the value. It doesn't necessarily have to be like innovations on the front end.
How do you think about privacy in this case? I know you tweeted recently about the trade-offs here. Do you think there's a new conversation to be had in Web3 privacy, or do you think it's basically the same conversation from Web 2?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot to be said about the ability to opt in or willingly offer up that information. And I don't know where we're at yet with that type of tech. You know, people talk about ZK stuff all the time, but I don't really see it anywhere. And I'm not technical enough to know like what what is required or what is necessary to like achieve that vision of private blockchains. But assuming everything sort of stays the way it is, and we have this like voyeuristic, like exhibitionist type of database where everything is public. I think that if somebody builds in this hypothetical scenario, somebody builds this shopping experience, the trade-off will be high enough, the value will be high enough, the convenience will be high enough that people will be willing to like offer or like compromise and sacrifice their privacy for that type of value. Not everyone, obviously, but I think if Web 2 has proven anything, it's that people will choose convenience over privacy more often than not, and I think we'll be surprised.
That's right. Do you ever think about instead of it being a trade-off, a lot of times really breakthrough consumer products challenge the assumption about what people are willing to share publicly and what's private to them. And while it doesn't have to be for everybody, sometimes you just have these breakout experiences. Like I would have thought about this in advance if I'd thought about the question earlier. So the example I might give is some of the social stuff around trading, or let's say investing, like back in 2020, 2021, with all the like the retail investing apps. Do you think there's something to be done here of like all this, like I thought it was interesting you brought up the word voyeuristic, like all this data is public. Do you feel like there's something to be mined there in terms of really killer new social experiences where the privacy is actually like the lack of it is a feature?
Um, is there something to be mined there? I don't know, but I think that I can speak for myself as a representation of like some segment of the crypto audience, where any trade, like I'm a shit trader. I'm terrible. I think I've lost more money than I've made, but I still do it, and I do it because it's a social activity. Like I'll ape into I'll ape into a meme coin because I saw a friend doing it, and then I'll message them with like, we're laughing together about how dumb this meme coin is, and even if I've lost money, it's still a social thing. When I mint something, an open edition or like some NFT, I'm doing it because I want people to see it. Like the actions that I take on chain, especially in like a social context, I'm doing it because I want to signal something about myself. And I don't think that everyone that's doing stuff on chain has that same intention. But I do feel a high degree of confidence that there are more people like me that are taking actions, they're minting things, they're rotating into meme coins because it's public.
Yeah, I think that's right. Um,
What about you? Do you have like privacy concerns? Where are you on this matter?
I don't know. I think the reason I'm asking this question is because I do think like um, one of my favorite pieces of advice that has ever been given to me about like building consumer products is you're only going to really succeed the best consumer products find new social graphs, and this is actually like an argument against the idea of like a portable social graph. Like the holy grail that we think of is like, in the Farcaster sense, it's like Twitter, but you can take your graph with you anywhere. Every great product that's really going to succeed needs to create a new kind of graph, new interactions between people. And there's some great examples of this in history that like Twitter's social graph is radically different than Facebook's, which is even meaningfully different than Instagram's. TikTok is a totally different animal because it's like an algorithmic feed. Um, and like Yelp, for example, is like uh, technically, I don't remember, this ages back. This was an example that was given to me that really opened my mind to it, is that like everyone signed in to Yelp through their Facebook. So it was you from Facebook, but the content and the individuals you interacted with, like comments on restaurants and all that other stuff, was just a totally different graph than Facebook's. So like the graph is the interesting thing. And the reason I'm getting at something with this, which is like for me, this like what's the essence of the interaction you're having with someone? And that's the nature of what you do with them. And what you do with them, like if you want to bootstrap a new consumer product that's just like blows up, it needs to be like a little bit maybe controversial, or at least in crypto, maybe it does. That you're like, making memes together on Pump.Fun, or you're like betting on prediction markets or something. Obviously, those have their Web 2 analogs, but that's kind of the way I think about the privacy is like Web 3 is weird. And some of the best advice I've been given is like lean into the weirdness. And it's often the best way to lean into weirdness is do something controversial. And privacy is like this glaring thing about the blockchain. Like it's all there. And so I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting space to mine. I guess that's my point. That's why I asked. It's like new social
Here's
graph
here's
by just
another
being really weird. Yeah.
here's another thing that I'll offer on like the topic of privacy is that like there is a subsegment of crypto people that want to put as much of themselves into crypto because it allows them to make those types of connections. And then and this is what's really fascinating about Blinks is that you can meet people where they already are and add crypto to it. So like um, if I have as much of myself in crypto, then I can connect my wallet to a social app and already have my social graph populated. Like I'm already following people, people are already following me. And that's interesting. But I'm already following people on Twitter and I already have a feed on Twitter. And so if I see a blink or somebody shares a blink of like some trade that they made that will pre-populate itself in Phantom for me, that feels like another variation that sort of sidesteps like privacy. So if I'm making a trade on some anonymous wallet, I don't want anyone to know that I have these balances, but I want to share that I've, rotated into whatever coin. Like I can take that to other places of the internet that don't and aren't Web3 enabled. And to me that's why blinks are interesting too, is that like you don't necessarily it doesn't necessarily have to be like a native or web 3 product. You can add crypto to Web 2 experiences.
I really like that. Um, yeah, maybe another like I've got a whole other set of questions I want to ask you, but just I really like this conversation. And another way I've been thinking about it is like we're all pattern matching to like what are the next great platform companies after, and are there going to be Web3 native ones? Today it's like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, just that Amazon, that list. They've locked down their social graph, and like maybe the thing we should be focusing on is the like massive economy of businesses that can be built inside of them as opposed to like new graphs. Like maybe the teams that want to build new consumer apps are swinging for a fence that's just too far away to try to create a whole new platform when there are like $100 million plus businesses to be built if platforms like Twitter and Facebook actually just like reopened the ability to do commerce on them, which is like part of the promise of Blinks. Um, and it's almost like it's like the brick and mortar, like I don't want to call it a small business, but there's just a ton of value to capture where like you don't need to invent a new social graph. You just are trying to enhance the experiences you can have with the ones you do have.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Anyway, random thought. There's another thing I'd love to chat with you about. This is a little bit of a change in subject, but you have this tweet from, I thought it was longer ago than this, and I actually forgot it was you, but this is truly one of the funniest tweets I've ever seen. I'm going to pin it to the chat here, or to the space. And for those of you who can check this out, it's a thread. You wrote, probably the best thing you'll see today. In 2017, a group of developers hilariously competed for who could create worst volume control interface in the world. And here's the results. And they are like, maybe I didn't see this from you. I don't know if you got this from somebody else, but I vividly remember this. And it's hilarious where it's like someone's tilting. Like the first one is you're like tilting. Here, I'm just going to pin it. Tilting the volume control, and the volume is like sliding back and forth like gravity is pulling it. They're just incredible. And my question for you is like, great, we all know these are horrible, but they're so interesting and creative that I'm wondering, is there like good design lessons, not just on what not to do, but on what to do? Tell me a little bit of the backstory of like why you tweeted this out. And then I guess the deeper question is like, are there actual like what are good things to do design lessons in how bad these are?
All right. Yeah, this is an oldie but goodie. This was actually an overwhelming experience for me. I think at the time I tweeted this, I had like
Yeah, I mean,
less
it's just
than, I think I had like less than 1,000 followers or something like that. Like I hadn't been that active on Twitter, and then this was just something uh, that I thought was funny that I didn't realize was going to have any like virality, and it ended up like breaking my Twitter for a few days.
this is possible
And
how I found
um,
you. I feel like I've been following you for years, but I don't know. And it's only about a year and a half old, right? This was April of 2023.
yeah, yeah, April of 23. I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from reverse engineering uh, designs from the problem, like just focusing on the problem, and then when you articulate some design that makes the problem worse, it just makes it more clear what the problem is. Like there's a long thread of just like consistently difficult patterns of what it feels like to have to be extremely precise about the thing that you click, and you can sort of like see that in all these concepts. And it feels like the more you twist the knife, the more you highlight the problem, and it just gets like, and the more aware you are about the problem, the clearer the solution can be. I could probably do a better job of humorously making things worse. I know a friend of mine, Soren Iverson, that um, he's another Twitter creator that has like a similar medium. He creates these like fake mock-ups every day,
I get his
and
newsletter, and they are
that
hilarious. They're fantastic.
hilarious. Yeah, and they're hilarious not because of like the design that he creates. Like there's nothing funny about the interface. It's that it's highlighting some problem that you've experienced once. And that's what makes it so funny, is that it's so relatable. Like any comedian that's successful does that well. They just like find some relatable pain point and then just really dig into it and drill into it and twist the knife on it. And that's why it's, you know, so funny. It's like it's almost become, he's made UI design a like comedic format as a result. And yeah, I think like the lesson is to just like really highlight a problem. I'm trying to do that a little bit differently, where like I'm a little bit more serious sometimes of just thinking about a solution to something, but it's mainly focused on just day-to-day stuff in crypto. And I think the content resonates similarly because it's highlighting a solution, but it's not meant to make the solution worse. I think I'm just thinking more along the lines of like how to make it better.
And there's definitely a lot to be learned
But
about how to make it worse, for sure.
totally, totally. I should start experimenting with that. I'd probably, I don't know. I maybe my content would be more successful if I did that, but I don't know. It feels like it's a little bit more against my
I
nature.
think your content's doing pretty well. And like you just retweeted this one, so I'm really glad you did because I would have never dug far enough back to even remember this was you. But like I'm I said it, I just gave you a heads up I wanted to ask you about it, but now I'm actually looking at them and I'm like trying really I'm like grinning over here. They're so funny. There's one where you like tilt the speaker and it's like you're firing a bullet out. It's like projectile to try to like anyway, they're fantastic. And I think like it gets to something that you said earlier that I really liked, which is where do you expect to see the shopping cart? Like it's the same thing here. Like there is a way we expect to adjust volume, and there have been some really neat small innovations on that that are really powerful. Like the way the volume appears as a little vertical bar on the left side of your phone, no matter like I have an iPhone, and that I can adjust that. Like my idea before then was like I got to go into the app or I press the physical buttons. There's just like a lot of really interesting little edge adjustments that people make in UX. But here, I think a similar idea exists of like there exists a very large parameter space of ways that you can do virtually anything. And like maybe it's a second law of thermodynamics thing of like most of them are garbage and some of them are hilarious, but some might be really far from our expectations today and excellent. And like, do you find that to be a part of your design process of like breaking the mold and trying something fundamentally different to do something we may all be familiar with already?
No, I don't know. I actually think it's the opposite. I'm trying to revert back to things that we're familiar with. Um, Again, because that's just like a core principle of good design.
Have you ever stumbled on something that was so different but was so intuitive that it just like stuck with you? And I'm putting you on the spot here, but like someone had to make these at some point. You know, someone had to design this the first time at some point. And like, when have you?
I
Yeah.
know, I know, and I think that's why like crypto wallets and their we're in like a weird place with wallets. But let me say something about wallets. Like the OG MetaMask design, like 20, whenever that first launched, like 2016 or 2017. I don't know. I'm assuming it was like around that time where they had the all of the buttons at the top, like buy, sell, transfer, and then whatever else you can think of, and every wallet sort of copied that pattern. So someone did that for the first time, and that was like uh, one of the first crypto wallet patterns that were established, and then everyone started copying it because we were so familiar with that layout. But it's like it breaks a lot of design rules because you know really good design guides you to a primary action and then has a bunch of secondary stuff that doesn't have as much visual emphasis. But when you overlay 4 or 5 buttons at the top of the screen and they all have the same color and the same level of emphasis, that then it creates like the need to think a little bit more about how to find what you're looking for, or there's no like expectation or anticipation of like what somebody might want to do, like what the most common action is. And so we've been copying that original MetaMask pattern from the beginning. And I think we're just now starting to break away from that where people are using more primary buttons. The common actions like at the top of a wallet are yeah, like more guiding towards like a either an action that the wallet wants you to take or an action that the wallet thinks you want to take. That being said, I've started to play around with a lot of like alphas and beta products that are combining wallets with these social experiences. And it's funny because there's like the wallet interface that you need, which is your total balance, and then all these rows of the different tokens that you're holding, and then the value of them. And then there's like a content feed, which is like a vertical scroll of like text or media. And more often than not, like I click all the way to the left on like some bottom nav to intuitively find where that content feed is, and I end up landing on like my wallet balances, and I'm like, oh, this is throwing me off because now the two worlds are merging, and I expect to go to like the home screen to find the main content feed, and I expect to go to whatever the element is all the way to the right to find my profile, which like could be my balances, it could be like content that I've created. Um, like there's a trading app that that I was playing with a couple days ago, where every trade that you made was broadcasted into a feed. And I'm like, how do I find trades that I've made? I just want to see like a feed of things that I've created. And I went all the way to the right, and it was like showing me my wallet balances. And like now there's this weird interstitial period where these patterns are sort of coming to a head, and like we're so used to seeing uh, content in a wallet that's laid out in a certain way, and we're so used to seeing like social content that's laid out a certain way, and they're at odds. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's as you're saying all this, it's reminding me that I think we're in these like weird teenage growing pains period with crypto where it's like all the products from just like 18 months ago are like Bank of America apps. Like you said, here's my total balance, here's all my tokens. But the real superpower is that like this money and these tokens can be used for anything. And as we're like starting to explore these social things, we've got these two products that are just getting smashed together. You've got your Bank of America app, you've got your social feed, and like now they're competing for like what goes in the lower right corner when I just try to get to that basic thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Maybe like last question on this, just because I think it's really interesting and I like your responses here. As you were talking about, like let's pattern match to the things people expect. Let's design things that are invisible. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here, but stuff that I've heard people say of like it just works, and you know where to find things. And like we are kind of in like a we got to think from first principles in crypto because there are all these wacky new ideas, all the way down to just like how you log in. One of my favorite examples is the City Bike in New York. I don't know where you're based, but I'm in New York City, and anyone who's come to New York, you'll know that like Lyft partnered with the city to like create these city bikes, and there's motorized ones. And I don't know that they were the first to do this, but when I got on one of those bikes, there was this instant moment of delight for me that there was no like rev on the handlebar the way you'd expect from a motorcycle because you're pattern matching to like a moped or a motorcycle or whatever. It's actually you just bike. The motorization comes from pedaling. And it's so fundamentally different. And again, I don't know that they were the first to ship this, but it's so different than what you'd expect from like a regular kind of like motorcycle or something. But it's extremely intuitive. And I'm curious if there's anything like me sharing that of like experiences you've had in crypto or just software generally in good design where it was just someone took a really fresh take on like how should this be designed and it was immediately intuitive and there was like no learning curve.
Man, you're really putting me on the spot.
Yeah, and I know I didn't give you this one in advance, so it's totally fine. I'm terrible on the spot too. But I like your answers here.
Yeah,
And I think this is incredibly interesting. I think this is the crypto problem right now.
yeah. I No, it's a great question, and I think all of the examples of interoperability that I've tried to articulate over the years, and by years plural, I mean like the last year and a half. To me, that will be the moment where you start pedaling and you feel the boost. Is when you're on some website, like if you're trying to like book a restaurant or like reading reviews of some place you want to go to, and it automatically filters for people you know. That will be the moment
Mm.
where it just like shows up. I think we have the groundwork laid for that. I don't know if that actually exists yet. I've had that moment playing around with again new social apps in crypto where I just connect my Farcaster and I have an immediate like um, list of following. Like I'm just obsessed with that idea of like a portable social graph because it that's part of the fatigue of using new apps is you have to like rebuild yourself, your identity, your interests, like and these connections that you have. And I think that's why a lot of the big tech companies have such like a stronghold on social networks because like the network effects are so hard to recreate, and it's like nobody wants to build a new social app unless it's hyper specific or hyper niche. And I think that moment will grow and become more substantial and more meaningful. I think another one that comes to mind, and I'm not sure if this is like if there's a specific example that is related to that moment of delight or that light bulb moment of like starting to pedal and feeling that boost. But I think a lot about Blackbird, which is like a restaurant app that doesn't feel or look like a crypto app, but it's powered by crypto. I think if you can build a restaurant network and then give people loyalty points, the first time someone will like, because right now Blackbird is allowing you to accrue and earn a token called Fly, and I'm sure they have like non-crypto native people or people using the app that don't even realize that it's crypto. But someday they'll be able to spend that Fly outside of Blackbird or outside of the restaurant network, or they'll be able to redeem it for something that is completely unrelated in the way that they earned it. Like, because right now when you go and use a Starbucks app, there's a loyalty program like the Star Rewards, and you never think about being able to spend your Star Rewards at some other coffee shop or some other restaurant. When you accrue airline miles, like if I accrue airline miles on American, I'd never think to be able to do that on some other airline. And it wouldn't make sense for these airlines to do it, but someday there will be a loyalty program that you are earning by using some business's service or product that you'll be able to spend somewhere else, and I think that will be some similar moment. And I don't know if that's actually, it could very well, like, there could be some version of that that exists already. But I think that will be another moment that will feel just like the city bike moment you described.
Yeah, I agree. That's reminding me of a tweet from a few weeks ago from a guy, Dimitri, that was like, I'll have to pin it, but it was like, has anyone managed to bring their sword to another game yet? And it just, I think it gets at
Yeah, yeah.
the promise and the like lack of delivery to date. Let's see if I can find that. But uh, 0xDesigner, this was really fantastic. I think I didn't quite know, like one, just generally a big fan, and it's great to have you here and get your thoughts. But I don't think it really crystallized to me until after this conversation that this kind of problem, the thing that you've been sharing around this, like um, both working within the familiar, but also trying to like invent some new things. I feel like this is the problem that we're working on in crypto today, and we're very much in the growing pains period. And coming back to some of the first things you said around like Connect Wallet has all this potential, but it's just not delivering today because of either technical or design restrictions. Um, so we've got a long way to go. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to share here? And also, like anything you want to chill or like any calls to action for the audience?
Yeah, no calls to actions or anything that I want to shill. It's just, it's really nice to have conversations like this because I keep my identity so separate. Like, the version of me on Twitter feels like a more authentic version of me than it is IRL. I have a lot of friends and family that have no idea what 0xDesigner is, have no idea like how enthusiastic I am about crypto. And so a lot of the conversations I have are in these like written or visual forms. So I really enjoy this conversation too because it just allows me to like verbalize this type of enthusiasm. Um, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, definitely my and dialects and the audience's privilege. Fantastic having you here. Uh, I don't know that there's anything I can others say other than like to the audience, 0xDesigner's here. Follow him if you don't already follow him. It's really some of the best and most creative design ideas for crypto. And based on this conversation, I know that we need it. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. And we will resume our regular programming next week. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yep. Everybody enjoy their weekend.